We are 5 years away from entering the 21st century. Humankind stands on the edge of the interactive age. You have come a long way. But are you ready for the future?
Introducing Sega Saturn. Aww, hit it!
Welcome back to Gameplay Classics. Today we're going to be looking at a console that was not very popular for the masses, but for gamers, this was an amazing console, the Sega Saturn. Sometime in the early 90s, Sega started working on a new console, which was codenamed Giga Drive. This was a play on words for their successful Mega Drive, or to North America, the Genesis. In 1993, the console was renamed the Sega Saturn, and it was being designed to be superior to the 3DO. The Saturn was built up as the ultimate 2D console, but when Sony released the specs for the PlayStation, Sega went back to the console to add some processing power for 3D games. This had to be completed in less than a year, but Sega was successful. They used technology from both their 2D and 3D arcade boards and dual processors. This would cause problems with programming for the Saturn, and it was very difficult to reach the full potential of the console. The Sega Saturn was being planned for September 2nd, 1995 release, with the day being dubbed Saturn Day. At E3 1995, Sega made a huge announcement. They announced that the console would be available on May 11th, which shocked everyone, especially third-party developers who had to rush their product. The console was also priced at $399, while Sony had announced at a $299 price tag for the PlayStation. Saturn was not off to a great start because of the rushed games that were released. They also didn't have the time to properly advertise the launch. The Saturn would hold its own against the PlayStation, but when Final Fantasy VII was released, Sony pulled ahead and never looked back. I've heard many people talk trash about the Saturn, and most of the time, they haven't even played one. If you love the arcade scene in 1995, chances are you were playing a Sega game. Daytona, Virtua Fighter, Sega Rally, and the list goes on and on. To play these great games at home, you needed a Saturn. At the time of the console launch, I was a big fan of the arcades, and one game that really gobbled a lot of my quarters was Virtua Fighter. I wanted the console, which had Virtua Fighter as a pack-in game, but due to finances at the time, I wasn't able to get one. The Saturn also had an adapter called the Sega Netlink, which was a 28.8 modem that fit into the cartridge slot for direct dial multiplayer. There were only 5 games released for play on the Netlink, which were Daytona USA Netlink Edition, Duke Nukem 3D, Saturn Bomberman, Sega Rally Plus, and Virtual On. The console would not be as successful as the Genesis, and many believe that Sega had ruined their brand with the Sega CD and the 32X. Customers were afraid to trust Sega because of the lack of software and support for both add-ons to the Genesis. This, with the price and lack of software when the console was first released, ensured that Sega would be last when it came to sales against the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64. Sega was able to sell 9.5 million consoles and was loved by many gamers, but Sony had made gaming cool for non-gamers, and the battle was won. There were many great games released for the console, but the one that I spent the most time playing was Virtua Fighter 2. For me, a great thing about gaming in the 80s and 90s was seeing how they would port great arcade games to home consoles. I used to love seeing the difference between the games and how close they came. I remember when Virtua Fighter 2 was announced for the Saturn and thinking, there is no way they'll be able to deliver this great game for the home market. I still have a Game Fan magazine that talks about the port. I remember looking at this screenshot and thinking, wow, this is not going to be good. The first time I played the Saturn version was at a friend's house, and it blew my mind. They had accomplished something that I didn't think the Saturn could do. The next week, I went out and bought my console with a copy of Virtua Fighter 2, Daytona USA, and D. I played some D, I liked playing Daytona, but most of my time was on Virtua Fighter 2. I became a very skilled player on the Saturn and was even able to beat most challengers at my local arcade. Playing the game today reminds me of why I liked the Virtua Fighter series more than the more popular fighting games of the time with Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2. Both those franchises were amazing, but playing Virtua Fighter 2 made me feel like I was playing the next generation of games. The game still holds up well on the old Sega Saturn hardware. Virtua Fighter is a series that is still going strong with the release of Virtua Fighter 5 on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. I don't know if I'm just stuck in the past, but I still prefer Virtua Fighter 2 and 3 over the newer one. I guess like an angry video game nerd that I watch, I like going back to the past. Only, I don't like torturing myself by playing the games that suck. Virtua Fighter 2 was released for the Sega Saturn in 1996 to great reviews. Most reviewers were impressed with the visuals and how close it played to its arcade counterpart. The game features 11 characters, which include Akira, Pai, Lao, Wolf, Jeffrey, Cage, Sarah, Jackie,
I look forward to our next bout.
Shun-Di, Leon,
Think you can win at that level?
and Duro. The first thing that you notice is how much better the graphics are over Virtua Fighter 1. But there are many more improvements. The gameplay is smoother, and the fighters have more moves. This is definitely a gamer's game, and it takes a long time to master the play mechanics. With this game, you really need to learn your character's moves and combos to have any success. The game series is different from other fighting games because you use true martial arts moves from a variety of different cultures. This can be something that you either love or hate. Not everyone likes the realistic type of fighting and prefer the fireballs and fatalities of Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. In my opinion, there is room for both styles of fighters. At the time of the release, it was the pinnacle of graphics for a home console. The fighters received the biggest upgrade from Virtua Fighter 1 as they are now fully textured instead of flat shaded polygons. The backgrounds leave something to be desired. They're an improvement over the original, but have a strange look to them. The ring seems to be floating instead of being fixed to the ground. They're parallax scrolling for the background, which seems a little flat. I guess that's because it is flat. Some other sacrifices, like the bridge in Shun-Di's stage, had to be completely removed, as well as some others. Now, none of this changes the fact that this was, and still is, an impressive looking game. The sound is mixed as well. The music is very memorable, and so is the announcer. The voices of the fighters seem to be a bit muffled. The fighters have some of the funniest lines ever heard in a fighting game. I love hearing things like, "After I win a fight," and when a fighter loses, you get things like this.
I want to fight more!
Virtua Fighter 2 has been released for the Sega Saturn, the PC, the Genesis, which can also be downloaded on the Wii Virtual Console. Of course, the Genesis version is nothing like the others. This is a 2D version of the game. The game was also re-released on the Saturn as Virtua Fighter Kids, which made things a little easier for younger players. If you have a Sega Saturn, you probably already own this game. I'm really hoping that Sega releases a Virtua Fighter combo for this generation of consoles. I would definitely download arcade-perfect versions of Virtua Fighter 1, 2, and 3. This game is hard for me to score because I'm such a fan of the game, and even playing today, I still get the same feeling that I had the first time I played it at my friend's house. Some of you might not agree, but I think this game still deserves a 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching, and keep playing the classics.